Hi, I'm Nicole. Everyone kept telling me that my unique life experiences and messages of hope would make a great podcast. So, I made one. Join me as I journey through life's many obstacles on Girl vs. World. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Girl vs. World. Now, it's been a while since I've posted an episode, and there are a ton of reasons for that. Going through last year, it was a really great year, but also a difficult year. It was a year where I was learning and expanding and realizing some limitations about myself. If you haven't listened to an episode before and this is your first episode, then let me just tell you that when I go after something, I give it 100%. And a lot of the times I put a lot of pressure on myself, right? To create the best thing, to make sure that things are perfect. And in doing all of that, sometimes I forget to take care of myself. And that's the truth is, something that I struggle with is I'll try to juggle too many balls in the air and then all of them drop at once. And that's kind of what it felt like when I stopped recording episodes, is that I was working so hard on so many things, like trying to get my career on track, keeping my sobriety in check. I was in a newer relationship at the time, and we were considering moving in together, and we did. So that had its own challenges and successes. And, I was doing the podcast and blogging and just trying to have life. And I just kind of crumbled. To be completely honest and transparent, I ended up on antidepressants because I was struggling to get out of bed. And even today, as I'm standing here talking about it, it is kind of a surreal thing where I didn't really see it happening as it was happening. I just knew that I felt so overwhelmed with all of the things that I was taking on in my life that I wasn't quite myself and couldn't find the motivation, or maybe even suffering from a bit of imposter syndrome, right? Where I would wake up and I would say, am I the person for this? Am I the person to have this podcast and be talking about these things when behind the curtain I am suffering from depression and having to get on medication? I had started a new job. I was like, am I even qualified to do this job? It's a big job, and it, can potentially affect people's lives. And the weight of all of that on my shoulders felt so heavy. That imposter syndrome, it really makes you feel like maybe I'm not the person that should be doing this. I was constantly questioning myself, and I just got exhausted from it. I had also stopped therapy. Had gotten to a good place with my therapist, and everything seemed great, right? It's like you know how to process your emotions, you know how to be honest, you know how to set boundaries, you're good at this, you're good at this, you're good at this. And I'm like, okay, cool. Here I go out into the world without my safety net. And I was really excited about it. I think I even posted some blog posts about it, and, I was very optimistic. And then February came, and I just couldn't even get out of bed some days, where the success of the day was getting out of bed. And it wasn't because I wasn't happy in my day-to-day life, but just this heaviness of all the pressure I was putting on myself to produce at such a high level. I think I just came to a point where I was like, boom, crash, right? And maybe some of you have gone through this before, and you know what I'm talking about. And maybe some of you haven't gotten there, but maybe you're even afraid to get there. I'll say this, having been on the other side of it now, and I'm looking at it from a new set of fresh eyes, I'm like, oh, I bet this needed to happen. I think this needed to happen in order for me to learn some things. And so that's what today's episode is about. It's not only to catch you up on the hiatus that has been Girl vs. World. I haven't posted on the blog. I haven't really posted on the social media pages, and I haven't recorded any podcasts. And honestly, it's been somewhat of a void in my life where I realized that I really enjoy sharing these things and talking about these things. And even if I feel that sense of imposter syndrome, that perhaps it's because of that I should talk and I should have a podcast and I should do these things because they are very human. And I think they're relatable, and people who experience this can go, yeah, I feel that too. And if there's anything that I've tried to create with this podcast and the blog is to help people feel less alone, that the struggles that they face are quite normal, and it's okay to talk about them in safe spaces. And I think with Girl versus World, I want to create that kind of space, not only for myself to talk through what I'm going through, but also for you to share. I'm very interested in having people on the podcast and talking through things and creating that sort of safe space. But in saying that, a lot of the things that I talk about on this podcast, maybe people don't feel comfortable sharing directly about in their own lives. And my goal is to encourage you to be able to do that if you feel like that will help you naturally, or going to therapy and speaking to your therapist about these things. My sort of process has been to be very vocal about what I'm going through, because I think not enough people have done it. And every time that I have come across somebody who does this, I think Mel Robbins is a good example. I watch her social media and I just feel seen. I feel she gets it, right? Like she puts out real videos of like the feelings that we have on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think it's an important thing. And even if I feel like maybe I'm not the most qualified to do these things, I do them anyway, right? Like these things are very real, very tangible, and we're doing them on a daily basis. Why not share that struggle? Even if I can't come to you with a degree in psychology or a bunch of different knowledge, like I personally am someone who researches constantly. I'm constantly digesting new content and trying things out in my own life to see what works. And I think that's part of the journey. So that's why I'm here to share that with you. It's why I have shared my recovery out loud, because I think it's important. The person that I turned to when I was ready to get sober was someone who lived their sobriety out loud, was somebody I knew was sober because they posted about it and they shared about it, and they created a safe space for me to be able to say, I need help. I'm scared. I don't want to die. And so when I created my blog initially was to like not only hold myself accountable, but to create a space for people to be like, yeah, me too. Like I struggle with that as well. How did you get out of it? Because sometimes, we get really wrapped up in how do we find a solution? Nobody's really taught us how to go about fixing some of these things. Maybe our parents didn't go to therapy, so that doesn't seem like a viable option, or we can't afford it, right? Like a lot of this stuff comes with great privilege that we can actually even afford to go to therapy. Some of us can't. Some of us, can only dream of that. So we have to go to support groups, or turn to our friends and family, or turn to online forums asking strangers. Like we have to do what we have to do. And this is a way for us to create sort of a community to be able to do those things, or at least listen to my free podcast. If you can relate to any of the stuff, maybe I can impart some of the knowledge that I've been privileged enough to gain through my own self-discovery. Maybe it can help you, and that's what I really want to focus on. So I've kind of caught you up broad strokes of where I've been. So let me talk about where I'm going at this point. I decided late last year, after, I'd been on medication since, February of last year. And it seemed to stabilize my mood, and I could function, I could get out of bed. But I was struggling with a whole new slew of issues, and they ranged from zero sex drive, which has never been a problem for me in the past, but was definitely a problem now and affecting my relationship. Not having the same thirst for the things that like made me excited. Like doing the podcast, like as soon as I got on medication, definitely not interested in doing anything. Like my passions for most things were just non-existent. It was like I didn't feel inspired, but I didn't notice it. Let me preface it with that, is that I didn't really notice. I just thought I was tired because I was working a new big job. I had a relationship. We were doing lots of stuff and things. So I'm like, I'm just tired. My life is exhausting to me. I stopped working out. So for a big portion of the year, I couldn't get myself to go to the gym. I was like, no, I hate it. I'm not going. I don't want to. I'm not going. I'm busy. I don't want to do it. And so like all of these things were starting to accumulate and I didn't see it. So now as I've taken a step back, I weaned myself off of the antidepressant based on doctor recommended schedule. Like I would recommend if not to ever stop your medication cold turkey. I'm just going to say that I am not a doctor, but this is from the advice that I've read and what I was told by my own physician is don't stop it cold turkey. You have to wean off of it so it can do it safely and give your brain time to adjust. And it's an adjustment period and it's different. It's different for everybody. So I can share my experience with you and I can tell you what the medication did for me and my body, but that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen with yours. So keep that in mind as I share these things. This is my personal experience. It's not, medically proven to be 100% for everybody, but this was my experience with it, right? So I weaned myself off the medication and I started to learn very quickly that things were changing. I was way more emotional. So, highs and lows coming at me pretty quick, trying to roll with the punches, but it is very difficult when you have gone from very stable mood to ups and downs. And you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like crying right now for no reason. And I have to deal with that. Like, I have to acknowledge that this is where I'm at right now. Even though I have a massive to-do list, this is what I have to do, So I was in that kind of a place. The end of the year, my relationship became very rocky with my partner. Now, I've talked about this with my partner, and I should say to everybody that we talked about me talking about this publicly and for the sake of the podcast, and I have his full support in that. And that was really important to me. Like, I didn't realize I needed to hear that because I think there's a certain amount of guilt that I'm here talking about my experiences and they might affect the people in my life, but to have my partner's support in that is pretty special. Like, it's a pretty cool thing. Like, I was really impressed that A, he even said that to begin with, and B, that he understood that like this is part of my process. In fact, we may get some guest appearances from my partner on this podcast in the near future as we start to explore a subject that I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, so things were starting to fall apart. And it just felt like my world was closing around me. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. There's very few times in my life where I feel like I don't know what to do because I've been in survival mode since I was like young, and I just had to take some time, and sit back and just like disconnect and figure out what was important. And so that's where we're at, where it's like, I'm really focused right now on a few things. Number one is adjusting to not being on the medication and figuring out like how I can treat my depression, or when I find myself getting into a lull, like how do I come out of that, right? So I'm back in therapy. I started therapy again early this year, and And I think it's important. I don't see it as a defeat, although initially I was like, man, here I am again, starting all over. But that's not what's happening here. We're not starting over. I think that's a big thing to remind yourself, is that you're not starting over, you're starting with experience. There's more experience. Every time we continue to grow and learn, that's more experience we have and more knowledge and more understanding. So try to be kind to yourself if you find yourself like going back to therapy or starting over in a relationship or whatever the case may be, that you're not starting over, is that you're starting from a place of like knowledge and experience, and you're doing what you need to do to get yourself to the next level. So I'm back in therapy, and we're working through a few things. So one of the things that I'm working through is my issues with intimacy. Now, I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast, but because of the abuse I faced in my marriage, feel free to go through some of the older episodes. I talk about it in pretty great lengths. I have a lot of issues with trust and intimacy because sex was used and weaponized against me. So it's not the most comfortable thing. I've done a lot of healing along the way. Like, I've had some really great partners who have showed me that men are kind and that men don't just want to like use you for your body. And some of those things that we struggle with when it comes to connecting intimately on that level. And that also intimacy isn't just sex. It's a lot of things, right? It's like the cuddling, it's sharing your deepest, most innermost secrets. It's, you know, it's a series of little things. It's not always just the sex. So that's something that I'm working on, is that when I start to become afraid in a relationship, like we'll have this closeness, and then as soon as something, you know, triggers me, I put a space between us. And then I'll come back. And then I put another space, and then I come back. And it's very difficult for your partner to constantly experience that. So I'm working through, how do I not put that space in between us, but still work on, you know, what's making me want to put that space, right? So that's one of the things I'm working on. Another thing that I'm excited to kind of announce on this episode is that I have for a long time, especially like since I turned 30, I've been no kids. I don't want kids. Don't want them, have no interest in them. I don't, you know, like just no. The answer was just no. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like, if I'm really honest with myself, one of the major reasons why I'm afraid, and I say afraid, it's not that I'm choosing not to have kids, it's that I am afraid to have children because of how big of a decision it is. For one, I find myself to be very selfish. So having children, I would have to give up, you know, how this is how my head goes. But you may not agree with this, and some of the things I might say might be triggering for you, like no, that's not it, or yes, absolutely. You know, you're gonna have emotions about this. And again, I'm speaking from my own experience and being really honest about my fears here. So, you know, you're gonna have thoughts and feelings and opinions about this, and that's okay. And I want to leave the floor open for you to have that space and to have those feelings. All I can do is speak how I feel and my truth. And if that upsets you, feel free to pause these episodes, take some time to yourself. You know, if I'm not the right person to be talking to you about these things and they're very triggering for you, absolutely switch off the podcast. I don't want to hurt you. That is not my goal in sharing this. What my goal is to start conversation, start a stream of consciousness, start bringing this front of mind for anybody that is struggling with the same thing. Even if we don't see eye to eye necessarily on it, I do want to create a safe space for that. So there's my caveat to it, because I realize this is a very sensitive subject and not a lot of people want to talk about it because there is a lot of opinion. There's a lot of projection that happens when we talk about these sorts of things, where it's like, why wouldn't you want to have children? You're a woman. Your body is made to have children. Why would you not have children, right? Or How is the legacy of your family going to be carried on if you don't have any children? Like, what's the point of being a woman if you don't have children? Your life won't be as full if you don't have children. Like, there's a lot of stuff. And as women, we have to carry that. And we have to be careful who we talk to about the truth of how we feel about that. Maybe for us, our journey is not to have children. That doesn't make us any less woman. It doesn't make our body any less insignificant. You know, it is a norm that was placed upon women, and we were property. Let's be honest. We've been property, where it's like, you're going to carry my spawn and like take care of the house and do all of these things. And that is going to be your purpose and your sole purpose, right? Those gender roles were very, very strong. In today's world, we can choose, which is huge. So I'm not here to say that if you are a housewife, it is inferior. It is not. You get to choose, and that's awesome. You can choose whatever you want now as a woman. You can choose to be childless, or you can choose to have children and have a career. You can choose to just raise your children because that is what makes you happy, and you want to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's freaking awesome. Like, more power to you, whatever your choice is in this world. I'm not here to say that your choices are wrong, or, you know, if you want to live your life a certain way, like, I think you should do that. But for me, here is my, you know, my thought process that goes along with this is that, you know, it is a big, big decision for me. I don't live in a world where I feel like I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I think a lot of people, you know, they're like born with it. And I feel like I just didn't get born with that. Though when I was younger, I was like very excited to have kids and a husband and all that stuff. But as I've gotten older, that's changed. So it's really been a journey of like discovering why I feel the way that I feel. And I don't think that discovery is done yet. So here I am. I'm going to create a series on whether or not motherhood is right for me and maybe you. I think there are materials out there, and we're going to cover some of the materials. For example, I am going through this book called Motherhood, Is It For Me? It is by Denise Carlini and Ann Davidman. Both of these humans are incredible. I learned about Ann Davidman on a different podcast where basically I Googled how to decide if I want children, and I came across her website and also her podcast, and I listened to the podcast because my partner and I were at odds on, like, I had always said I didn't want kids. He also said the same thing. And then something changed for him where he's like, I don't know if I want to have kids, but I don't want to close the door on it. And for me, immediately my reaction was, well, I guess that's it. You don't want to be with me because I don't want kids, and you want kids, and that's just the end of it. But it's not as simple as that. I think I was very hasty in making the decision that I was making in that moment, feeling like really upset and like kind of like blindsided because I thought we had agreed on this thing. But that's really black and white thinking. To think that like people's ideas and what they want doesn't change is just setting yourself up for disaster. Not only for your partner, but yourself as well. Like, we change how we feel, we can change our perspectives, we can be open to new and exciting things. And I think that's part of the learning process and becoming your fully realized self. You know, becoming the best version of you is keeping your mind open. And mine was closed. And I think last year my mind was closed to a lot of different things. So this year is opening that back up. And I want to inspire you to also do the same. So I'm going to go through this journey. I decided in talking with my partner and talking with other people that this is a worthwhile journey for me. At the end of it, I might still decide that children and motherhood are not for me. But I also want to explore what the other options are. You know, having a biological baby is not the only way to be a mother. We can be mothers to all kinds of humans, right? Like, think about sometimes you've been maybe even in like a job and you had that one woman who just like took care of you. Like, she was the work mom. That's a form of motherhood. Even though it might not be as involved as, say, having your own baby. That's a full-time job. I don't discount the level of difficulty and everything that goes into having your own baby. But maybe you can find motherhood in other areas as well. So we're going to be exploring other options in addition to deciding, is motherhood for me? If it is or isn't, and what are the other options that are out there for figuring that out? How does one figure that out? How do I figure out if I want to be a mother? That's a big question. And it's not an easy one to talk about with even your friends, to talk about with strangers. For me, I was very worried. Like, if I talk about this publicly, people are going to hate me. Like, my mother is probably going to feel sad for me. Like, my friends are going to be like, well, you've always just never wanted children. I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to look at it again because it scares me. And that's the truth, is looking at it is very scary for me, because it is a challenging aspect, whether that comes from ideas of, what I think motherhood is, what it will potentially do to me, maybe not living up to the expectation of what I think a great mother is. My mom sacrificed so much for us and worked so hard, and oftentimes without the help of the men in her life. Like, she had to persevere no matter what. The kids were priority. My mom was always like second, third, fourth, or fifth when it came to raising us kids. Like, there is a level of sacrifice and unconditional love that exists there that I'm so afraid that somehow I lack, or I don't know. It's hard to explain, other than I know there's forces within me that are resisting this idea of motherhood. So I'm going to look it straight in the face, and we're going to see what happens. I realize that this might not be a comfortable topic for people. Feel free to tune out the rest of the episodes. If it's not for you, you don't have to take it. If it is for you and you want to be on this journey with me, I am so excited to have you. And I welcome your questions. I welcome you sharing the podcast with other people who you think might have an opinion or might have a feeling or might be struggling with the same thing. But most of all, I hope that it inspires a journey within you. That if you are where you are in your life right now and you're trying to decide, what should I do? That maybe this can help you. So I'm going to go on this journey. The book that I'm following, I believe it's 14 weeks. So you do a chapter every week. I am not going to share her exact prompts or the author's exact prompts and things like that, because I think, you should buy the book if you want to go through the book. I'm using this as a reference and to inspire these podcast episodes. I'm in no way being paid by the authors. I'm not in any sort of affiliate anything. Like, this is the book I've chosen, and I'm going to go down the path live with you all. So be mindful of that. This might not be the right resource for you. It might be the resource for you, but this is the one I'm going through to kind of inspire this journey and inspire the conversations that I think will be important for this. So I hope you'll join me. This is the journey that we're going to go on for the next 14 weeks. You're going to be along for the ride with me. I don't expect at the end of 14 weeks to have a solid answer. I don't think it's going to be 14 weeks and I'm going to be like, yes, I want to have kids, or no, I don't want to have children. My partner and I both have agreed on the fact that what we've agreed to do together is put in the work. We've agreed that at this juncture, we don't need to decide if we want kids or not. We need to decide for ourselves what that is going to be. Not together, but separately. And that's something that this book teaches, is like, you got to forget all that for right now. and just really go on this journey and figure out what you want. And this process can happen with having children, with getting married, with switching jobs, maybe going back to school and starting a new career. These are big decisions, and they're not ones you can just make on the fly. It's not as black and white as we make it all out to be. Maybe it is for some people where they're like, I have known since I was little that I wanted to be a mother. That's awesome. Or I have known for a long time that I do not want to be a mother. Awesome. Whatever that is for you, like, I'm excited for that. If you are so certain and you totally know, like, I admire you, and I hope to be in more of a place where I can make that sort of decision. But right now I'm in journey phase, and that's part of the fun. It's hard. I'm probably going to cry. I feel like I'm going to ugly cry, probably. Definitely. Let's say definitely, because I'm an emotional crier. I have to remind people when I'm talking to them and I start crying, I have to say, I'm not trying to manipulate you with my crying or make you feel bad for me. Like, when I express difficult emotions, I cry. Like, it just happens. I also happy cry. So there's that. If I'm like really, really happy, I will cry. If I'm sad, I'll cry. Sometimes I cry for no reason. That's the way it is sometimes. So we're going to go on this journey. Over the next 14 weeks, I'm just going to share what it's been like for me, share the resources that I found along the way. I mean, in a perfect world, it would be super awesome to be able to interview or talk to the people who wrote this book. I'm not going to set that as like an expectation, but I certainly would like to assist in helping in any way that I can with these sorts of things, because as I listen to their podcast, she states that it's very difficult to be public about these sort of things. So here we are. We're going to be public about it. We're going to use this as a resource, and we'll see where it goes. And I'm interested in hearing from you. Your DMs to me on social media, messages on the website, those things can stay between us. I will not share them on the podcast. But I am interested in hearing from you all. So feel free to send me messages if you like. I will try to get back to them in a timely manner. But yeah, so I feel encouraged, and I feel motivated to give this a shot. And I'm excited to be able to do this on a platform where I feel comfortable, and that I've created a safe space. And yeah, I hope that you'll come on this journey with me. I hope that you learn some awesome things from this, and I hope it makes you feel a little less alone in this world, because I think that we as humans have the power to reach out to one another in whatever media, whatever platform, to be able to connect. And this is me putting stuff out there to connect with you all, to show you that you're not alone in this world, and we're here all just trying to figure it out, one day at a time, as the sign suggests behind me. That's all we can do. That is what we're capable of. We can take it one day at a time and figure out what makes this life, as special as it can be for us. So I welcome you on this journey. It is good to be back. Thank you for your constant support, your likes, your kind words, your shares. I appreciate that. As a smaller podcast, everything matters, everything counts. So thank you again. And thank you to the people in my life who support this kind of avenue and kind of journey. I have a really good support system of people, of family and friends and colleagues that support me on a day-to-day basis. And it's quite incredible when you change your energy and start to attract good people into your life, that support system grows. So I'm very fortunate to have that, and very fortunate to be able to come to you today and every day that I put myself out there like this, to be able to share my experience from a really, really human place. Anyway, thank you again for listening to the podcast. Feel free to share, and we'll see you next time.